Hello, this is Susan. Just a quick note about this episode. Kind of like the Q Bureau in Scarecrow Mrs. King, sometimes files get left behind, some cases are never solved, and some podcast episodes take a little while to make it to launch, like this one. This episode, featuring the guests of the Scarecrow Mrs. King walkthrough podcast, The Mrs. King Chronicles, was actually recorded almost 2 years ago. It's a little bit of a time capsule, and for reasons mostly boring and also involving long-lost Zoom recordings, we are finally able to bring it to you, our listeners. Many thanks to Taya, Jen, and Miranda for being so patient, and a big shout out to Lexie, the fourth podcaster on Mrs. King Chronicles, who was also not able to be part of this interview, but is a big part of the SMK fandom. So here, finally, is 80s TV Ladies Fan Bar on the Mrs. King Chronicle Fan Podcast and the women who made it. Enjoy.
Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we look back in order to leap forward. Here are your hosts, Susan+lambert+hatem and Sharon+johnson.
I'm Susan, and I'm a secret fan of the 70s Sid and Marty Krofft show, Electra Woman and Dinah Girl. But don't tell anyone.
And I'm Sharon. My secret fan guilty pleasure is General Hospital on ABC, one of the last, I guess it's now 3 remaining soap operas on network television. Days of Our Lives is now exclusively being shown on Peacock. So yes, I am a soap opera fan.
We won't tell. Here at 80s TV Ladies, we love to hear from our fans. Feedback, questions, and comments from our listeners bring us a lot of joy, so keep them coming.
This episode is going to be about the Mrs. King Chronicles. So it's time to belly up to the 80s TV Ladies Fan Bar, where we explore that special area of 80s nostalgia, the television show fandom. Television shows have fans that live beyond the life of the show itself.
Certainly, we're in a time of great nostalgia for and unprecedented access to 80s television shows, which is one of the reasons we started this podcast.
Indeed.
Lots of reboots are always happening of 80s TV. A few years ago, Dynasty, Murphy Brown were rebooted. More recently, Punky Brewster, Roseanne, now called The Connors, and Quantum Leap. Why do we think they're rebooting, Sharon?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that these days it's much harder to reach an audience with a brand new show with brand new stories and characters. But if you start from rebooting a show that some people, if not a lot of people, already know or know about, it makes it that much easier, perhaps, to get an audience to come and watch your show on whatever platform it may be on.
Name brand recognition.
Exactly.
Instant audience connection.
Right.
One of the reasons we have the movie Battleship.
Yes.
Based on a game.
I actually had forgotten that existed, but yes, exactly. That's a perfect example.
This is not an 80s TV Ladies show at all, but it is an 80s show. The A-Team just resonated with me immediately. I loved that show in ways I cannot really defend now, though a lot of people love that show because the characters were so fresh. They seemed so fresh to me, and the concept seemed super fun. But anyway, I'm curious about why we love the things we love, why they become the things we look back upon. It's today's fan bar. We're going to be looking at the Scarecrow Mrs. King themed fandom. I feel like we should have some specialty cocktails for our fan bar so we can raise a glass to the love of television here with our special guests. Today's special guests are also fellow podcasters. They have been doing an episode walkthrough of Scarecrow Mrs. King, all 88 episodes.
Welcome to the show, Taya Johnston, Jennifer Peterson, and Miranda Thomas.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having us.
We're very excited to have you on our podcast.
It's like a party. So we're going to go one by one for a minute, just because I want listeners to be able to match your voice to your name. We'll go alphabetical order by last name, I guess. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, tell where you're podcasting from, and let us know what is bringing you joy these days. So, Taya Johnston, you're going to go first. Yeah. Jennifer, you're on deck.
Okay. Taya Johnston, and I am podcasting from Clarkston, Michigan, and it's about almost an hour north of Detroit, so metro Detroit area. And what brings me joy? Actually, right now, a lot of crafting stuff, which I usually don't get to do. I'm not very crafty, but I've been into the Cricut and making tumblers and shirts and ornaments and all kinds of stuff. So that's been my outlet.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jennifer Peterson, and I'm from Beaverton, Oregon. So people might know Beaverton, Nike headquarters, Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon suburb. Lots of hiking around here, so that's what brings me joy. I'm outside a lot, exercise, hiking, and dance class.
What kind of dance?
I do a lot of Zumba. Does anybody else Zumba?
I used to Zumba.
I love Zumba.
Because a dear friend of mine Zumba'd, and so he actually passed away. And then, I went to, one of the things that I did to kind of process was I was like, I'm going to go to a Zumba class. So I went to 3, and I pretty much cried through all of them. And so I think everybody thought I was weird. But,
very cathartic.
But it was very cathartic for me. Yeah. It was really lovely.
Aww. Yeah. You know why I like Zumba? Is because you can't think about anything else. You're doing choreography and dance moves, and you can't think about the list of things you have to do when you get home, and all the things you're behind on, and of course the exercise. So, yeah.
I guess next is me.
Yes.
Miranda.
Okay, so I am Miranda Thomas. I am podcasting from my bedroom, more specifically in Florence, Kentucky. I'm about 15 minutes south of Cincinnati, so I'm right by the Ohio border, close enough that I can throw a rock and hit Cincinnati. So,
not that she's done that.
Not that I've tried. What brings me joy? I was thinking about it, and I was going to take Taya's, but since she already did crafting, I am doing NaNoWriMo. So I am trying to write a book again. I've tried it a couple of times before. So that's bringing me both joy and stress a little bit this month.
All right. For our listeners, can you tell us what NaNoWriMo is?
NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. So it's a challenge to try to write 50,000 words on a novel in 1 month. So you average about, I think it's 1,600 words a day or something like that, so that you can get to the end of the month and have a full novel written.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have tried it many times and never successfully gotten to the 50,000 words.
But have you gotten further in your novel?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's an excuse to get me to write. So that's joyful. The trying to get to the 50,000 words is the not so joyful.
That's a lot of words.
Maybe lower your expectations.
Yeah, lower my expectations and just do the writing every day.
It sounds like you're at least making progress, and that's a win in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Someday when I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start there.
It's because there's a lot of other people that do it. So there's a lot of support. You can find other people to cheer you on. So it's fun.
Yeah, I've done sort of the Dramatists Guild equivalent for playwriting.
Oh, yeah.
It's called End of Play. I did it, and it was great. And I did write End of Play, but there's a big chunk in the middle that's just a lot of notes. But that's okay. I have a very good roadmap, and it was a good progress. And again, it's a good way to sort of get yourself into the rhythm of things. It's there. Mm-hmm. We all need that sort of thing, like looming podcasting, dropping deadlines to actually edit podcasts, things like that. So we're going to go backwards to the order, starting with Miranda. What or who got you into Scarecrow Mrs. King for the first time?
So my mother watched the show when I was a wee child. I was 6 years old, I guess, 5 or 6 years old. And I remembered watching it with her. But then what really got me into it when I was in late in high school and early college, I watched all of the reruns. And so at that point, I'm an impressionable 18, 19-year-old. And I'm like, I want to be a spy. I want a Bruce Boxleitner, so that's what got me into it very, I guess, seriously is the best way to term it. But it ebbs and flows. I still go back and watch the show a lot, but I'm not as dedicated as maybe some of the other people you're going to hear from in a moment.
We all have our own levels of dedication.
Yeah.
To all our things.
Jennifer, what about you? Where did you start?
Yeah, so I also started watching. I watched as a child in the 80s. I'm 51 now, so it was probably in my early teens. And I am a scientist, so I have a highly technical career, and I like to dabble in going back and rewatching some of the older shows from my 80s childhood. So I just picked up Scarecrow Mrs. King one time. I'm like, I like that show. And I got really into it. And then I found myself connecting with people. Taya was the first one I connected with. And we went to and met up at a Hollywood show to meet sort of the cast and became really good friends. So it was more just loving the show, but also finding a really great group of friends to connect with at that time. So I'd say it's both things.
That's great. And Taya?
Mine was the actual series premiere. I was 10 years old and I saw this, and I hadn't watched, 'cause at 10, I didn't know Charlie's Angels or Bring 'Em Back Alive. I didn't know any of that. I just saw the preview, the series preview, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love all of that. Kate Jackson has been my idol since I first saw that preview, I think. I was a diehard fan my entire life. And I don't know why that show specifically. There's not been another show. I don't get into shows like that like I do this one. And it's just, I don't know, there's just some magic there that just pulled me in. And so I watched it any chance I could. I mean, I didn't miss a show during the full run. And then it came out, was it PAX, I think, re-showed it, and other channels like
Lifetime,
that.
I think. Had it for
Lifetime was later. I think PAX
ABC
did it,
Family.
and they kind of butchered it. But yeah. And then when after I had my first son, I was 27. I had he has a chronic illness, and I had just a lot going on, and I was seeking out something that brought me joy. And the internet, I think it was just getting kind of started. It was 2000. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, hey, I wonder if there's anything online. And then I found this community, and I met Miranda shortly thereafter. And we've been friends for over 20 years, which is mind-boggling. And our age. I know, right? Yeah, I'm 49. Jen said she was 51, so I can do that. Miranda and I started with another friend of ours. We started a SMK themed store. We had T-shirts and bumper stickers, and what else do we have? Friendship, the little bracelets, the Italian
cards.
charms.
We had episode cards.
We had trading cards. We had all sorts of things.
Wow.
So we did that for a few years. I have my website. I've had on and off. It's been running, for a long time on that. We've just done a lot of things, and then we did the podcast, and just seemed the natural progression. So.
Well, I'm super grateful to your website, by the way. It was one of the first sites I found when I was like, okay, I guess I better do some homework if we're going to do this thing. And and again, very thorough, and so many great resources and scripts. And it was just a treasure trove and very, very helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
And so have you guys met at one of the anniversaries, or?
Jen and I met in 2017 in April at the Hollywood show. And then Miranda and I met Miranda and I went on, we did a SMK cruise. We did Washington, DC trip for my 30th birthday. We did a podcast from the anniversary.
From the anniversary. Okay. And Will you be going to the next anniversary?
I plan to. Yeah.
I'm sure.
I think we're going to go.
Yeah.
Because
I've only missed one, so
yeah, maybe we
That
can
is
do a
fantastic.
podcast. We're planning to do a podcast from there as like a, like we did the last time for the last 35th. So maybe we can do
we'll do a
group one or
joint
something.
podcast or some kind
Yeah, that
of
would be fun.
crossover episode. It'll be
something.
great.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That'll be super fun. Actually, that would have been super fun. Incredible fun. But dear listeners, we did not do that. The best laid plans of mice and podcasters, Someday, we may make it happen. Now tell me about the cruise.
Oh, that was like it was a weekend cruise, Royal Caribbean, right? In
yeah, it was Royal Caribbean.
2004, I think. And there was it was from a group chat that we had on Yahoo groups, right?
Yeah, it was Yahoo
Okay.
group.
We are really
Yeah,
going
and
back
there's-
through the internet history.
Yeah. Oh my
kids.
gosh. I tell you, 20 plus years we've been friends. So yeah. And there was, I think, maybe a dozen or so of us that went.
Yeah.
We went to the Bahamas, I think.
Yeah.
And just had a good time, it was fun.
Spent a night in Miami. That was fun. Too.
Yeah. Yeah. We won't talk about that.
All right, hold on. Was Martha Smith there with the Germans? Because
No, but that was before I met Martha. Although she would have fit right in.
You would have loved it.
we went to a strip club.
all right,
It was
ladies.
the first time I've ever done that. It was trippy. It was yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Okay, was it a male strip club or a female strip club? I mean,
No, male.
I've been in both actually, but
yeah, so high,
Okay.
but it's a male. It was a male.
Yeah,
one.
this was boys.
Mm-hmm.
all right. Was it called Boys? Because that's pretty good. That's a pretty good name.
I don't know.
If she remembers, I'll be impressed.
No, I have no idea what it was called.
I don't remember.
My mom always used to say, "You're going to meet the internet scary internet people, right?" And yeah,
Yeah,
right,
my
Mom, they're
husband was the same
Scarecrow
way.
Mrs. King fans. They're not exactly scary internet people.
What made you guys want to do the podcast?
Miranda has
You want me
done
to start?
podcasts. Yeah, she's done podcasts for a few shows, and I was looking for a creative outlet, and I thought, hey, why can't we do a podcast? And I reached out to Miranda, and she was game, as she always is.
She
And
said it's a
then
lot of work.
she didn't warn me about that much, unfortunately. So I asked Lexie, who she worked for me for a few years, and I had introduced her to the show. She was looking, it was Christmas time, and we were going to be off for 2 weeks, and she wanted something to kind of binge. And I said, well, let me show you this show. So we watched it on our lunch hour, and she loved it and just fell in love with it. And so she used my DVDs, and then we watched it sometimes at my house and sometimes at work on our lunch hours, and then pulled her into it. So she was our, what do we call it? Our next generation fan. And then I had met Jen right before we did the podcast. We started deciding on the podcast. I'd met her at the Hollywood show where they had a mini SMK reunion.
Was it always going to be an episode by episode podcast, or did you consider any other format, if you will?
I don't think so. It was more of, we were going to have 88 of them.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up being a few more than that because we had some specials and things like that. But yeah, it was always going to be a kind of a recap and kind of injecting knowledge that we knew, behind the scenes stuff that we had found out. And then it kind of grew from there. We became friends with a few of the cast members. So we were able to get some, fun insight from them and interview them. And our basis was talk about the makeup and clothing, the fashion faux pas, I think we called it. We were going to talk about the episodes itself, behind the scenes stuff. And then we were going to have our music videos, like giving people recommendations to watch those, and then also on the fanfic. So that tied into the episode. So it was pretty much how we expected it to be, I think.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm really enjoying particularly the costume stuff.
We all have very different opinions.
You do. Sweater vest, no sweater vest, Although I guess everybody kind of agrees no sweater vest now. But
Yeah,
how
I think
could
so.
you possibly know that in the 80s?
The 80s was a very interesting fashion time. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and it's funny because, the three of us lived through it. And Lexie is rediscovering the 80s because she obviously is a 90s baby and she is really into the retro stuff. So she is like, oh my God, I would die for that. And I'm thinking, I would die if I had to wear that. I would never be caught dead in that, Of course, I was caught dead in that because I would wear that as a child. But like just some of this stuff, it's just interesting how different perspectives there are. And it was funny. Another thing happened, which I thought was hilarious. We were recording an episode and they were talking about the two Germanys, East German and West Germany, East Germany and West Germany. And Lexie's like, there were two Germanys? And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
She didn't, it wasn't that close to her as it was to us, sadly. And then another time it was, she's like, doesn't he just call on his cell phone? And I'm like, didn't have cell phones back then, so just stuff like that. It's just, you take it for granted, but it gave a different perspective.
It's true. So much phone booth action in the 80s.
Yes.
So much phone booth
on
action.
Scarecrow.
And especially on Scarecrow, right? Like calling in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had to pull over and then call someone, follow them to the place wherever they're going and then see if you can find a phone booth to call in. Yeah. That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. And 94 episodes. So congratulations on that. That's huge. We're like tiny babies compared to that. That is a long...
It goes by fast, and then it also goes by excruciatingly slow. So it just depends on the day, I think. Yeah. But thank you.
Any podcast tips for podcasters and people that want to do walkthroughs?
Lexie and I were very diligent. We had a calendar, and we set it, and we did everything we could to stay true to that calendar. Yep. And if something happened, maybe if Jen couldn't make it one time or Miranda couldn't make it, the show went on, unless it was me, which I think I had to do once or twice because I had the recording, the recording equipment and everything. So that's why. Otherwise it could have gone on without me. But we stuck to it and we did, as best we could. Sometimes we would have to do back to back, and that was killer. We would spend 3 hours recording because our podcasts were typically an hour and a half to 2 hours anyways because we added a lot in there. But then to watch it, to record it, to set up everything, and then if you've ever listened to our podcast, you know that we go off on major tangents and we talk about all kinds of things. So,
I don't know anyone else who does that.
Our listeners tend to like that. We got feedback that they really enjoyed, the camaraderie between the friends. So we left as much as we could in.
Well, and it's clear there's a lot of joy in the podcast, which I respond to and a lot of love. And, that and that you guys are really enjoying the show.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I did. I think everybody did. I miss just getting together. It was like having a book club, but you have to edit afterwards, which was the hard part. And we've talked about just, getting together, every other month or something, just to get together and talk. Cause it's, it's really nice to have such a shared interest in things, and be able to share that joy with somebody is really nice. And, it's just the editing part that was always hard. You guys are doing it right. You have somebody that does that, right? That's just dedicated
Kevin,
to that.
Is our
shout out
number one awesome editor. And
that was like, in the beginning, it was probably 12 to 14 hours it would take me to edit an episode.
Oh my goodness.
Shout out
but
to
you
him.
were brand new at it too.
Yeah.
The first time that we recorded, it was just Sharon and I was trying to run the thing and I was like, oh, this is going to be a problem. I completely did it wrong. I recorded, but only one of us, I think, only part of the time.
We actually had to re-record our first episode because of the sound was just miserable. And we our first 8 episodes are horrible. And then they get better and we have issues in some of them, but
Yeah. It's a learning curve.
The show.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a real learning curve
Yeah.
when you're podcasting. And
Yeah.
I think it's a really, I love sort of finding new places to be like, hey, I've never done this before. Let me do a podcast and figure out how you do a podcast. And, you know, it's a little bit of my sweet spot because I like, you know, I started in internet marketing at a time when nobody knew what that meant. It was called internet marketing and now it's called digital marketing. So, and so I sort of like, oh, let's go into this uncharted territory and, you know, and start charting, even if it's new to me. Like clearly there's been people podcasting for decades. So
Yeah. It was all new to us. It was very challenging. It was frustrating at times, but for the most part, it was 90% enjoyable. So yeah, I'm glad we did it.
Miranda, what are your other shows that you've done or other podcast shows?
So I started, I don't know if y'all have ever seen I say this. Have you seen Firefly?
Oh, yeah,
Of course.
Have you seen the TV
Yes.
show? Okay.
Yes.
So back when Serenity was getting ready to air, the movie was getting ready to go into theaters, I started working on a podcast called The Signal, where I didn't have to do any of the editing. All I did was use my voice and do whatever they told me to do. So I did that for 10 years. So we did The Signal, and then I also did Firefly Talk, which was mainly interviews with different cast and crew of the show. So those were my first two. Then I decided that I was going to try to do it on our own. And so we started a podcast for the television show Heroes, where we would do a recap of the show each week after the show aired. That was called The Ninth. So that was way more work than I ever anticipated. So we did the first 2 seasons of that show. And then I started doing a sort of recap podcast like we did for Scarecrow Mrs. King for a network called the TV Rewind Network. So we did Felicity, I did Alias, and we just got finished doing Chuck. So those are pretty much my my podcast main experiences. I've guested on other people's podcasts a little bit, but yeah, so that's all the fun stuff I've done.
That's amazing.
It really is.
I mean, that was 2002?
It was very early in podcasting. So yeah, we actually won The Signal won podcasting awards and 4 or 5 different podcasting awards, but we had a really big crew. We had, I think at one point, 12 people working on that podcast. Wow. So we had 4 editors, and I did do some segment editing for that, but it was a big group of people that worked on that show.
Since it was so early in the world of podcasting, how did that all begin for you? How did you get involved?
So I used to do internet radio. I was a radio DJ on internet radio back, I don't know, 2000, 2001, something like that. And a friend of mine said, oh, they're going to do a podcast for your show, Firefly. I'm like, what are you talking about? What's a podcast? So they hooked me up with the people that were getting it together, and we're going to do it. They actually all met on a message board, a Firefly message board back in the day. Here we go.
Board. We are really taking you through.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
if you're leaving Twitter, you might want to go to Yahoo groups or message boards.
Yeah. Yahoo groups doesn't exist anymore. So you're out of luck.
You're out of luck.
But message boards, I don't even know where to go to find those anymore. Where is the main message board? But
I seem to remember being on a couple of message boards, but for the life of me, I can't think of where they were,
exactly.
where I would go to look for them.
Yeah. So that's how they found each other. And then somebody sent me their information so that I could do it. So that's how I got into it, from being an internet radio DJ.
That is fantastic. You're like a pioneer.
Yeah.
That was the same time. I was working on The Life Aquatic for Disney, which was Wes Anderson film. And the same producer, Barry Mendel, was on that, and Serenity. And I had to go down and meet with him, and getting a meeting with him because he was basically just in love with the fact that he was doing the Firefly movie. He was very excited about Serenity, as a lot of the nerds were, like.
Yeah. There's definitely a cult of Firefly. So yeah.
Yeah. So can you hear the signal today? Is it still out there?
You can still go to the website, and all of the episodes are still out there. SerenityFirefly.com is the website.
So wait, so you did that for 10 years?
I did it for 10 years.
And isn't it like 13 episodes?
13 episodes of the show.
So how did you
So it wasn't just like recapping the show. Like we had serials that we did that were like set in the world of Serenity. We had different like it was all a bunch. It wasn't all just Serenity. Like we took the content that was there and sort of like you do your own fan fiction. Well, we did our own audio dramas and different stuff like that. And then we'd also like share whatever news, if there was something, a cast member or a creator, or, we would sort of share that on the podcast as well. So,
yeah. Love that show. It's a great show.
Oh man, this is the perfect episode to talk about fandom. Because we have all sorts of fandoms. And that's one of my questions is, why do you think certain shows, because a lot of shows resonate. Like if you, there are shows that are beloved by anybody that watch them, that are like secret. Like there are shows I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody that I love that show, but I love that show because I saw it when I was 6 and it just, whatever. But then there are the shows I think like Scarecrow Mrs. King, and then of course the Star Treks and all that stuff. But also Firefly. It was a season. It was like
not even a season.
Yeah,
half a season.
Mm-hmm. And that show has a huge fan base. Mm-hmm. Like percent, like it's a distilled fan base because it's so little to work with, right? It's one thing to be a fan of Buffy because you got
7 seasons.
Yeah. And then if you really take it, you can add Angel.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what do you think it is that makes a show resonate and to carry a fandom through kind of from beginning to way beyond the life of the show? Well, clearly we have a lot to talk about. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back. All right, we're back.
I think first and foremost, it's the stories they're telling. If the story is going to resonate with more people because they either, one, understand the situations that the characters are going through or can identify with it, even if it's science fiction. If they can somehow put themselves in that same situation or feel that character, I think that's one thing that will drive people to come back to a show over and over and over again. I mean, like in Scarecrow Mrs. King, for me, it was about fantasy fulfillment. I wanted to be the suburban spy mom. I wanted to be, even at 19 years old, I wanted to be, just like Amanda King. I wanted to help people and do all the things that I could and use my smarts to outwit the bad guys. So I think if you can see yourself, I think for me, that's the thing that resonates with me the most and makes me a bigger fan of a show like that.
I think chemistry plays a big part in it too. There's a magic that some shows have. Mm-hmm. Like, if you look back if we're talking about Scarecrow, at the time we had Remington Steele, we had Heart to Heart, we had Moonlighting. I watched those on occasions, but it wasn't must-see TV, if you will. It wasn't, I had to see these. It was very specifically Scarecrow. And I think I was drawn in. I think, at least in our group of our MKC ladies, the 4 of us, it was a draw to the strong character of Amanda. And correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, but I think that because we're all very strong women, I think we were drawn to that as well. I know I was, and we've talked about it before, and I know we all have agreed that was a big pull for us. it was very much the strong Amanda character that pulled us in. I think a big thing, and of course Bruce Boxleitner is not hard to look at either. So there's always that, but sometimes his character could be a bit of a jerk too. So a big chunk during the first season for sure.
Yeah. It's a good thing he's good looking.
Yes, indeed.
I know, right?
You're
Exactly.
like, okay, we're giving you a pass. Tall,
I wanted to
cute
shove
guy.
him down those stairs in the first episode. So
Get yourself together. Yes, we know you're tortured.
yeah.
We got it.
Jennifer, what are your thoughts about that? About fandom?
Yeah, I think definitely the chemistry is a big one, but for me, I'll just emphasize, I was always attracted to shows that gave me a very strong woman character. The 80s was sort of breaking out a lot of, there's a lot of traditional roles for women. And it was the first time women could be police officers. There's just a lot of strong roles. And even Amanda being sort of a housewife, she was divorced, which was, I think, unique at the time. Kind of took on sort of that unique role as going out and being a spy, which was kind of cool. So definitely just, the same thing the girl said, just wanting to be that myself at a time when I couldn't, in my life, there wasn't a lot of examples of that. So it was on TV, right? And I was like, oh, cool. I can be that. And the chemistry, definitely. I think Scarecrow Mrs. King has just a chemistry with the characters that is just so sweet, and the love story. And it just has the whole package. That's why I think people still keep picking it up. And my daughter, I got my 20-year-old daughter into Scarecrow Mrs. King, and she actually came to the Hollywood show with me. She was so into it. And it kind of transcends generations, I think, a little bit, when you have that special mix in there. So, yeah.
When we started the podcast, it was the first time I'd watched a show in many years. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how well it held up, because I really wasn't sure. You just never know when you go back and watch something from years past, how much it may or may not still resonate. And it's in a lot of ways, it feels very timeless, despite the fact that, yes, there are no cell phones and, that
Right.
whole thing. But yeah, it's really interesting and something that's really hard to figure out how to make it happen when you have that kind of chemistry, not just in your leads, but in the cast as a whole. It all comes together and that magic happens, and you end up with the Scarecrow Mrs. King.
Lightning in a bottle. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think they definitely had that.
Yeah, I think it's that mix that you all are talking about, like the mix of cast, the mix of characters, the mix of situation. I mean, there's something about metaphor for me that resonates, and they, even though, yes, it's a housewife and a spy, there's something going on that's a metaphor for Amanda King about wanting to become like her own person.
Yeah.
And a person that is fulfilled on all the levels she wants to be fulfilled at, that she may not even know. And so there's a really interesting, and again, it sounds really deep because the show is goofy and fun and mostly lighthearted, but it's the same thing that makes Buffy resonate for me. I don't know, it was like a third episode. There's, she's got to go out and slay some vampires because the hell mouth is opening, and she's got to meet her team at the club to fight the vampires, and her mom grounds her in her room, and she's like, "No, Mom, I have to go." And her mom's like, "I know everything in high school feels like it's life or death, but you're grounded." And at that moment, I was like, I'm in with this show forever, because it's now a metaphor for being a teenager and being in high school. And it's a metaphor for
The angst.
Angst and the life or death stakes that feel so real. And it's also the time you learn that, at least for me, like, oh, there are real monsters in the world, right? They don't necessarily vampires, and you can't stake them, but there are real bad people in the world, and they're doing bad things, and they need to be stopped. And so that is that fantasy element of, I'm going to sort of participate in this by loving these characters who are doing the thing I want to do and having this adventure, is very powerful, I think. And I mean, one of the reasons we love stories and on all levels in theater and film and television. But as Sharon has pointed out before, like television is in your home. Television is your own campfire, right? For stories. And so those are the characters that you see every week, or sometimes every day. When you think like, oh, we're just looking at television shows, but I'm really fascinated by how much power they have to tell people's stories and to make us sort of dream of bigger and better things, better times.
I think that's why with Scarecrow, you can, if you put everybody into a room, all the fans into a room, like I'm talking about the diehard fans, a huge chunk of them are going to be our ages, in their mid to late 40s, early 50s, how much it formed, their adulthood and things in different aspects. I don't know why. It just feels like there's just something that it ties everybody together. And I think we all go back. Like I know I went back to it when I had a rough patch of, a lot of chaos in my life with my, then baby. He's now 22, but, and I needed to have something that made me feel good. And I went back to that. And there was something magical about that time of, when we were, for me, when I was 10 years old, it just made you feel safe and warm. Like you said, the campfire, just something you can just feel good, good again, I don't know. That makes sense.
Yeah, we're all looking for that these days.
Especially now. And I think we did get a lot of fans to our podcast during the pandemic. There were a lot of people. We gained a lot of people just because they found us that way, because they were searching out for something, and it made them feel good to kind of listen to a bunch of friends, talk, and about something that they were interested in.
It's like being in a cafe listening to a really good conversation. That's what like some of my favorite podcasts feel like. You're like, oh my God, I'm done with my coffee, but I gotta hear what ends up happening over there right next to me.
Do you guys hear from people? They were like, I'm yelling at the, their device or whatever, like trying to talk to you, talk back to you, and they catch themselves all the time. We heard that a lot too.
That's funny. We haven't heard that one yet, but I'm just so pleased how many people have actually responded to the show and said, like, oh, here's what I think. Here's why I think this show was meaningful. Here's what it meant to me. Here's what I think about,
Shared experiences is nice. Yeah.
We've gotten some really thoughtful and really great responses to the episodes.
The Hollywood show. You guys have mentioned a couple of times. What is the Hollywood show? It's like an event where they bring stars from all sorts of shows.
Yeah, I think it's primarily just to get, meet people and get autographs. And it comes from a wide variety of shows. But in this particular one, they sort of advertise as a little mini Scarecrow Mrs. King.
Yeah, they were like the headliner.
Yeah. And so they kind of brought all this together. But normally I think it's just a smattering of different groups from different shows and movies that are there to sign autographs and meet people.
Adam West was there, and that was actually... This is kind of an inside thing. It was very interesting. So Adam West was there, and Bruce really, really wanted to meet him, but he kept, having to be at his table. So he was like, "I'm going to go sneak off over there and see if I can get over there." And so I had to hold down the fort, and he went, and it was just too long of a line, and he didn't want to, cut or anything like that. So he came back, and he's like, "I'll see him Sunday." He didn't come on Sunday.
Oh.
So Bruce didn't get to meet it, and then a few months later he passed away, and so I felt so bad for Bruce because he didn't get to meet Adam West.
Boxleitner didn't want to cut in line.
Yeah,
you'd think that if he walked up to the line and said, "By the way, I'm Bruce Boxleitner. Can I just say hello to Adam West?"
Probably wouldn't even have
that. Somebody would have been like, "Go ahead, will you sign my book?"
Yeah, it was very sweet. Though, but I felt so bad for him.
Yeah,
and it was really a great time. Because I was helping out, I got to have dinner with Bruce and Martha and Greg. So Martha Smith played Francine Desmond on the show, and then Greg, who played Jamie, and then Bruce. So it was just very intimate, maybe 10 people there at dinner, and it was really fun and got to hear some great stories and things like that. On my site, Call Me a Cab, I did a walkthrough of the weekend. So, so people that couldn't go could kind of live vicariously, and some videos too of Bruce. So
that is so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
I actually brought my 20-year-old to that show, and she was there grilling Bruce and getting all these great stories from him. And he would just tell her stories
he has no filter.
And told her stories for like 45 minutes after the show.
Wow.
It was great. This young girl just as interested in Scarecrow Mrs. as everybody else. I think he was a little flabbergasted.
Well, I think it's funny that Tron now has love. Like when that movie came out, it was a big, it was a disappointment. And then now it's become a beloved, beloved. I loved the movie when it came out and was very excited about it, but it was not a huge success at the time, but now it's this beloved piece of sci-fi history.
When people would come up, I could tell, like when they would come up with stuff, I knew if they were either a Scarecrow fan or if they were a Tron fan, just by who they were, like, if they were a male or a female,
or a Babylon 5 fan.
I was going to say
Babylon 5.
Of course, yes.
Babylon 5 was a big one too, but the Tron fans were pretty easy to pick out. The Scarecrow fans were pretty easy to pick out too. Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. What was the profile?
He bleeds the fifth.
Oh, any Gambler fans?
Not that came up, but I'm sure. Like I was a Gambler fan.
I was a total. That was my Bruce Boxleitner.
Yeah.
That was the I got to keep an eye on this guy.
That character was adorable. Yeah,
absolutely adorable.
Billy, right? Billy
I think so. It's so interesting, again, this sort of how much you can connect now with a fan engagement, with finding ways to actually meet and see the stars of these shows that that are beloved. It's very exciting between Comic-Con and all these sort of side quests for fan engagement. And it's so, clearly so meaningful. And everybody's got a show. We had Robin Bernheim on, a writer from Remington Steele, and she was talking about not One from the Heart, because that's a movie.
Princess?
No, the When Calls the Heart.
Calls the Heart.
So When Calls the Heart, and she talked about how just massive that and very, very powerful that fan love is. People have gotten tattoos,
Wow.
And you're like, well, that sounds like it's a Star Trek, right? Like that sounds like you are a Marvel character, and it's a school teacher in a mining town out west. It is a powerful show for the fans of that show, and I sort of love that there is now, in some ways, something for everyone. It's hard to find it.
It seems like there's more and more people that are into shows too. I mean, back when we were really into it, it seemed like we were like the only ones. And so everybody would keep their freak flag down and low, and nobody would see it. And now everybody's just rolling them up and pulling them and just flying those flags. And, and I've always been like, you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to be super in your face about it, but I'm not going to be embarrassed, because there's some people that are like, I don't want my family to know. I don't want any of this. And I'm like, whatever. I don't care. Everybody's got weird stuff that they're into. And if this is my weird thing, then that's fine. So
I do think it used to be so much harder to find find your people for whatever show or book.
They were in the forums, in the Yahoo groups.
Yes. First we found them in the, but before the internet came along and made it easy to find them. I mean, there were some, I think Star Trek had a fan club, but it wasn't easy to reach out to someone and talk about it and, enjoy it together. And that is definitely one of the good things about the fact that we do have the internet today. It's so much easier to find your people when it comes to whatever show or property it is that you're interested in, and allow you to engage as deeply or as you wish, and as broadly as you wish. Because I think we all have a bunch of different things that we're interested in to some degree or another, and finding other people that also are as interested is a lot easier than it used to be, which is wonderful.
Well, and I and there's every decade has sort of got its love and its nostalgia and all that kind of stuff. But I think because of the sort of the vast sort of upscale in technology that happened in the 80s for television, for time shifting, for cable, clearly extra resonant about 80s content, from movies to television to music. There's a lot
to
of
music,
retro.
yeah.
And that it's still really one of those ones that's just like, we're going to reboot everything from the 80s, and we're going to, and kids are going to find it and be like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like Miranda gets bragging rights, but you're like, you were thinking Firefly was cool at the time it was happening, and not my kids who are like, Mom, have you heard of this show from Firefly? I'm like, heard it.
I had to watch it when it was preempted for baseball.
Hated those preemptions. Those were horrible.
And D&D is cool again. Like you had talked
Stranger
about hiding.
Things.
Yes. We've been cleaning out my mom's house, and I found my character sheet, my handwritten character sheet for playing Dungeons and Dragons. And again, it was just so uncool to be playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time that I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and very few people were doing it. My friends were doing it, but that was about it. And now it's the hottest thing that's ever happening. There's 15 television shows. There's 70 million podcasts about people drinking and playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I've never played that. I don't know, but I have a nephew, I think, who's like 30, and he does it with him and his wife.
It's super cool. I play Dungeons and Dragons with my stepkids every week.
Nice. That's awesome.
It's fantastic. And our family friend, Anna, who's like a niece to me.
For my nephews, they're 10, bought them a Dungeons and Dragons so that I can give it to them for Christmas so I can play with them. But they've seen it, but they don't know how to play yet. So it'll be fun to introduce it to them.
Oh my God.
Be the gamer.
I didn't know it was back.
Oh, it's back. It's back in a big giant way.
Big time.
Wow.
We saw Comic-Con and get more popular. Certainly the Big Bang Theory helped, and just the whole, that was kind of the explosion of fandom in general. And I think that pulled all of those people, just like television viewers, out into the open, finding other people who they could continue to play the game with if they didn't have anybody.
Well, and nostalgia, like we're sort of forgetting the nostalgia. I wouldn't be nostalgia for shows and movies in the moment they were happening when I was a kid. Like, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't wait to watch this later. I don't know why. I was like, I can't wait to watch this later. I was watching it right then. I was enjoying it so much that I couldn't wait to then watch it again.
Before the VHS, okay, Scarecrow was like right at that, it was on, but it was like, I would get my little trusty cassette recorder, the audio cassette recorder that I got at a garage sale, I think. And I would record the episode and then listen to it. And that's why I know like episodes so well, because I would listen to it over and over and over again, because we didn't have VHS for a while. I think I didn't get that until like the late 84 or something like that. And then VHS tapes apparently were like expensive because my parents never had any. So
initially they were almost $100 a piece. That's how expensive they were.
Ridiculous.
You had to can I re-record this? I'm going to record over this.
I did that over bad things that I shouldn't have like someone's wedding and but it was important. It was very important that I got that.
Get out the Scotch tape and tape over the little
that little
recorded plastic hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. Oh yeah. I still have.
Miranda's like, what are you talking about? What are you people talking about?
That much younger.
I know. I totally did all that stuff. So
yeah. I still have all my original CBS tapes. Yeah. They have the commercials in them and all that. Yep.
I have a VHS of the Star Wars special with commercials.
The
Star Wars Christmas special which
wow.
aired in
1978.
1978.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that on Beta?
It was on VHS. I don't even know how I have it, but I have somebody
Wow.
copied it for me from one they had,
Wow.
and it is insane. If you're ever like, George Lucas is a genius, you watch that Star Wars special. Nobody wanted to do it, but they were all contractually obligated. So they're like in
my gosh.
2 scenes as holograms, and then it's like Wookiees, right? And Chewbacca's trying to get home for the holidays, and Jefferson Starship is a band, and like they just use a lot of holograms.
I've never seen it.
It is.
I'm going to go home and watch it tonight. It's on Disney Plus.
It is insane.
I'm going to have to watch it. My husband's a huge Star Wars.
If he's not seen it, he'll lose his mind. It's so bad.
He has.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But
He's
even
seen it a million times,
better, even better are the commercials, because this VHS has the commercials that aired in 1978, which you talk about a look back into what were we doing?
It's like a time capsule.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was happening?
Oh my gosh.
Were we all like it really is like a thing where you're like, okay, maybe we are all in the Matrix. Maybe we're all like in a vat of goo and this isn't real. And because
funny.
Yeah. You're like, this is weird. Somebody it may be one of the weirdest things I've seen. And you're like, this aired on television.
As big a Star Wars fan as I am, I've never seen it. I was in college in 1978 and didn't have,
I didn't see it when it aired.
I didn't. Yeah. And so I heard about it years later, but it's one of those things I've been meaning to watch on Disney Plus, and I haven't. I am going to watch it tonight when I get home.
I was going to say I have it on VHS, but apparently it's also on Disney Plus.
Although maybe I should borrow your VHS because
I'll get the commercials.
Yes, I do still have a VHS player. I have a couple of them actually.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it'd probably be a lot more fun to watch it with the commercials, which is not something you say very often.
I actually didn't see. I have a confession. I did not see any of the Star Wars movies until I got married. So 94.
Mm-hmm.
In 94, I think we watched it. My husband was like, "No, you have to watch this." So I was like, "Okay." And so he had to watch Scarecrow. Although he watched Scarecrow when he was a kid. He was an army brat, so he lived in Germany, and they would get, not as many of them, but he would get to watch them. And there wasn't a lot of TV, so that was one of the shows he got, and he watched it and enjoyed it. So we were able to get married once I
oh,
knew
thank God.
he liked it. Yes, it would have been travesty otherwise. Yeah, I didn't watch any of them until like mid 90s.
That's pretty impressive. My husband is not a Star Wars fan, and he's a TV creator and writer and movies and loves sort of a supernatural thing, but he's not really a sci-fi guy. And Star Wars in particular, he's like, and I'm like, okay, I don't know about this.
I did not know this about him. Oh my gosh.
I thought all men were sci-fi people.
No, he's got a very weird lines. He's also not a big sword and sorcery guy. So like I watched, Game of Thrones by myself, and that was no fun. I mean, it was fun, but it wasn't, I got to binge it a lot faster. Because
when you have to wait with somebody else, you're like, come on, we gotta watch this.
But when we first started, we know each other from college, but we started dating later in life. He was like, let's get together on Thursday or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm watching Buffy and Angel, so I don't know what you're doing, but you're welcome to come by and bring Thai food. And so, he did. And so it was fun.
That's awesome.
What are your 2 favorite episodes of Scarecrow Mrs. King?
Mine, Brunettes Are In, which is season 2. Somebody attempts to
kidnap Amanda.
And put her up for white slavery. I like the more angsty episodes myself rather than the big fluffy. I like the more angsty things of, them getting, they won't, they get together. And then when they are together, but, other things are playing against them and things like that. So I always like those. So Brunettes Are In was very intense one. And then any of the European episodes, season 2 European, I think there were 5 of them. So any of those, but probably Armand and Tegrenzy.
Excellent.
All right. Who's next? Jen, Miranda?
Jen, you want to go?
I like a lot of the early ones. Probably some within season 2. My favorite is probably on the website, and that's the one, I'm Not Now, Nor I've Ever Been a Spy. And then the other one's probably Saved by the Bells. And those two just have a lot of humor in them, but also sort of the burgeoning kind of romance between the two of them, like especially, when she loses her memory in the one, I'm Not Now, Nor I've Ever Been a Spy. And Lee has to try to convince her that, yes, you are a spy. Just the sheer ridiculousness of it. Just so clever. I just thought the writing and just the development of the character is like he's actually realizing that, yes, he needs her and he really does like her in some way on both of those 2 episodes. When she's kidnapped, Saved by the Bell, she's kidnapped and he has to try to get her back. So in both cases, I think he realizes he really cares about her. She shows how smart she is in both cases, because she has to deal with these crazy situations. So those are probably my favorite ones.
All right, Miranda, you're up.
I can't decide on 2, so I'm going to choose 3. The first one I choose is Triumvirate. It's always been one of my favorite episodes, even though it's sort of at the end of the 3rd season, I guess, when my 1st and 2nd season are really my favorites. But so that's my first one. Second one is 3 Faces of Emily, because I absolutely adore that episode.
Jean Stapleton is
amazing.
Brilliant. She's brilliant.
Yep.
She's brilliant. I wish they would have put her in more.
Me too.
I know. Only 2 episodes was not enough. And then, of course, the first time, the pilot episode is, I've watched that episode probably 600 times in my lifetime.
Yep.
So it's absolutely my favorite episode.
Yeah.
It is a very great pilot.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
It really is.
It's just perfect. Even Kate said that. She said, "This is great. This is a great movie, but how do we make a show on this? Now what?"
It establishes character, world, the surrounding characters, and then what's at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really just beautifully done.
It's great.
It's real. Like, I was surprised when I went to rewatch it. I mean, I loved the show, growing up, and kind of rewatched it around, like, in sort of the tough grad school years.
Yeah.
And for my, like, reward at 2 a.m, or whenever it was I came home. Anyway, and but rewatching it, I was surprised how really, really well done that pilot was. Just beautifully shot. Really strong pilot.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those pilots that was kind of needed, where the show kind of needed to find itself after that before it sort of hit its stride. It just started out coming really well from the very beginning.
Those are all good ones, you guys.
Those are great ones.
Like,
now I'm
list.
like, oh yeah, that one's good. Oh, there's that scene. Oh yeah, okay. Well, all right. This has been fantastic. It's been really great to connect with you guys, and I've really enjoyed your podcast. And we're going to shout out Call Me a Cab.
Thank you.
I'd love to shout out the Serenity Firefly website. Is there another website to shout out for you guys? Jennifer, anything that we can shout out that people can go and support your environmental science work?
Not off the top of my head, other than the Columbia and Willamette River restoration efforts, up here in Pacific Northwest. Yeah, that's about it.
My son went to Willamette College. My stepson, Spencer.
So you're aware.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area.
It is a gorgeous area. What is it called? The Willamette?
Well, you could do Columbia Willamette River Keepers, which are local organizations that they try and restore, clean up, and protect those river systems.
Fantastic. We will. Well, thank you so much for coming on and bellying up to the 80s TV Lady fan bar and talking fan love.
This has been so much fun.
You guys are great.
All right.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So for today's audiography, let's start with the Mrs. King Chronicles podcast. The official website is mckpodcast.com, and it can be found on Apple Podcasts.
And Taya's website, Call Me a Cab, can be found at callmeacab.com. CALLMEACAB.com.
You can find Miranda's Firefly podcast at serenityfirefly.com.
And Jennifer mentioned the Columbia Willamette Riverkeepers, which can be found at willamette-riverkeeper.org and will also be linked from our website. So we have a question for you, dear listeners. Why do we love these shows so much? Why do we love television and TV characters, especially from those 1980s ladies-driven shows? Is it nostalgia? Is it that we're a nation of adults so obsessed with our childhood that we must relive it, each and every moment of it? Let us know what you think.
As always, thank you so much for listening to 80s TV Ladies. You can always reach out to us at our website, 80stvladies.com. That's 80stvladies.com.
Or send us an email, 80stvladies@gmail.com.
We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.
Thanks for listening.